Okie dokie. We are on to our second machine. We have an array of machines to choose from. I'm going to go with the John Deere here at the beginning just because there's some damage to the machine and it's going to give a little bit of a better walk around as far as teaching the walk around versus the two newer machines with zero damage. So we have the 700 John Deere Dozer. We have GPS on this machine, so it has twin poles or twin towers, whatever you want to call it. The first thing I'm going to do, just like the other machines, is going to start from the bottom and work my way up. I'm going to inspect the blade first. I see the cutting edge looks fine. They've cleaned as much debris as they could with the shovel. Everything looks good. I'm inspecting both of the poles, all of the cables that go to the poles. Also making sure that I don't have any water or debris in any of the GPS connections that are open. Most of these will have caps you can put over them to keep them dry. You can see that one over there is plugged in. This one is just not plugged in. Actually it's broken. Yep, you can see it's broken. So again, this is why I wanted to inspect this machine. This should be clipped onto here to be dry over the weekend. Worst case scenario, if this is broken like this, we're going to want to just put that inside the tube just to keep it as dry as possible. So that's going to be marked on my list as something that we need to give attention to. All of the grease fittings we're going to inspect and grease if we have the opportunity to grease. If we have a fuel man or lady that's going to come later, obviously we're in charge of this machine. So don't just sit in the machine while they're greasing the machine. Even if you're union or something like that and it's not your job, you're not supposed to touch it. It is my job as the operator to make sure that all of these fittings get greased. So I can just walk around and chat with that person while everything's going on and just say, hey, you forgot one, or don't forget this one, it's squeaking. You know, whatever you got to do to get the machine greased, let's get it greased. The hydraulic lines, I don't see any leaks. Everything looks good. The front of the fan compartment is not dented or damaged. The headlights I'm inspecting, again, the cables for the GPS, grease fittings. The number one thing I'm going to look for, starting at the ground and working my way around, is the track sag. And also, did somebody clean the tracks, which they've done a phenomenal job on this one here. So the track sag, if we put a ruler from the top of the track here, the high point, all the way to the back roller, the high point on the cleat, the gap that's low in the middle there, if you measure on a straight edge, that is your track sag. This looks perfect. You want just a little bit of droop. You don't want it nice and tight because it'll bind and pop. But you don't want an extreme amount of sag through there. We're going to want to tighten that up. In the bottom, there's a plate you can take off and we can access that and grease. We're going to move around to the cabinets. These are probably locked. Yep. Make sure this doesn't shut. Got the battery compartment, the master switch. This is number one I'm going to look at. Make sure it's in the off position, which it is. The top of the dial here is what's indicating the position. So if I was to turn it to the right and move this over to here, this machine would be ready to go. I'm also inspecting, this is the master computer for this machine. So if at all possible, when the fuel truck gets here, if we have air, we're going to want to blow this stuff off. No water. I really don't want to reach my hand in there and wipe anything off if we don't have to, but definitely no water. Also making sure my battery cables are nice and connected. All the covers are on nice and good. Everything looks good in here. Moving on. Our def fluid. Making sure that the toe pin is in. Again, we don't have any fluid pouring out of the back. This is our access panel to all of the hydraulic lines underneath. The fuel is locked, important for not getting any debris or anything in there, or if our fuel stolen, and the cap is on. Our AC compartment that hangs off the back of this machine, we want to make sure nobody's backed into anything. You can see the Tremble GPS computer or GPS guidance system for the satellites is hanging on the back with the antenna. So again, checking the lines, making sure there's no damage. Both of the lights are working. You can see on this Dozer, it's hard to see maybe in the camera, but there's a pretty decent dent in the back of this machine. This is the fuel tank on the back of the machine, so I don't have any leaks, but this is definitely going to be something that I'm going to mark down as you know, needs attention or just be aware of for the future. If this thing starts to leak fuel, we know why. As well as right here, this is the cover and the guard for a backup beeper, so making sure that's not damaged, and we're going to check that before we start to operate this machine. Moving over to the wet side, as I call it. This is where all of our fluids are. So our windshield wiper fluid over here. We have all of our filters. All of these are going to be named. This is our fuel water separator, our fuel filter, oil filter, or I'm sorry, hydraulic filter. Making sure that we see the labels, we see the dates. This is also important. So when was this changed? Even though my machine is not telling me that we need new filters, if I'm in charge of this machine and I walk around this machine today, I'm going to say that this was done 8/11/21. So if it's service time, whether this machine has run that many hours or not, we might want to just let our service people know. You can see they have a spare grease gun in here. That's good and okay to stay here. We just want to make sure none of the lines. This is the actuator or the valving system. All of the blade movements and drive movements, anything that happens hydraulically happens from here with all of these solenoids driving it electronically. So everything looks absolutely phenomenal in here, just a little dirty, which is to be expected. Again, if we can blow it out, that would be phenomenal. Track sag on this machine looks fairly good. Same thing on the other side. The most important thing we're going to do now is open I'm gonna go over to the other side. Actually, I think this. Before we go over there, our pole, grease fittings, hydraulic lines. Everything looks good. That lock over there is stuck. There we go. Over here we can inspect some of our intercoolers. Filters. So this is the cooler for the hydraulics. Intercoolers over here. Another cooler for the hydraulics or the oil. No leaks. Turbo looks good. Making sure there's no leaks in the center or out of the exhaust portion of the turbo. We can also inspect this here. This is where the big debris will suck up. This is where it draws its air from. So some of them have a clear jug on the bottom of them. You can unscrew the top and just dump the jug out if it has large debris in it. I think this cabinet's just stuck. Yep. So that's also why I picked this dozer. You know, don't stop. We have to get in here and inspect this. Don't just fire this machine up. So this is the most important thing before we start this machine is don't just pull the dipstick and inspect the dipstick. So what we're gonna do, you can have a rag or a paper towel with you. I'm just gonna wipe it off, push it all the way down as far as it'll go, and then bring it back out again. And we can see we're full, oil is good. So we're gonna put this back in there. Checking the other side of our filters. The air is going to be pulled through here towards the front.